Some people say a man is made out of mud. A poor man's made out of muscle and blood. Muscle and blood and skin and bones. A mind that's weak and a back that's strong. You load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. I was born one morning when the sun didn't shine. I picked up my shovel and I walked to the mine. I loaded 16 tons of number 9 coal, and the straw boss said, well, to bless my soul, you load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. I was born one morning, it was drizzling rain. Fighting and trouble are my middle name. I was raised in the canebrake by an old mama lion. Can't no high-toned woman make me walk the line. You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. If you see me coming, better step aside. A lot of men didn't, a lot of men died. One fist of iron, the other of steel. If the right one don't get you, then the left one will. You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. When the storm
There's 100,000 Frenchmen in New Orleans. In New Orleans, there are Frenchmen everywhere. Your house could fall down, your baby could drown. Wouldn't one of those Frenchmen care? Everybody gather round, loosen up your suspenders, hunker down on the ground. I'm a cracker, you want to, gonna take good care of you. Who built the highway to Baton Rouge? Who put up the hospital and built your school? Who looked after shit kickers like you, the Kingfish do? Who gave a party at the Roosevelt Hotel? Like the whole North half the state down there for free. People in the city had their eyes bugging out, 'cause everyone looked just like me. Here come the Kingfish, the Kingfish. Everybody sing. Here's the Kingfish, the Kingfish. Every man a king who took on the stand at all men and whipped ass, just like he promised he'd do. Ain't no stand at all men gonna run this state, gonna be run by little folks like me and you. Yes, the Kingfish, the Kingfish. Friend of the working man, the Kingfish, the Kingfish, the Kingfish gonna save this land.
The Lord has answered the prayer. He has called the barbecue. Come to my feast. He said to 125 million American people. But Morgan and Rockefeller and Miller and Baruch have walked up and took 85% of the victuals off the table. Now, how are you going to feed the balance of the people? What's Morgan and Baruch and Rockefeller and Mellon going to do with all that grub? They can't eat it.
I am a phoenix rising from the
They
ashes.
can't live in the house. Give them a yacht. Give them a palace. Send them to Reno and give them a new wife when they want it. That's what they want. But when they've got everything on the God's living earth that they can eat and they can wear and they can live in, and all that their children can live in and wear and eat and all their children's children can use, then we got to call Mr. Morgan and Mr. Mellon and Mr. Rockefeller back and say, come back here. Put that stuff back on this table here that you took away from here, that you don't need. Leave something else for the American people to consume.
Hello, everyone.
I am a
and
phoenix rising from
welcome.
the ashes.
It is I, your big special boy, Dick Warlock. Can I get a sound check? Can you guys hear me well right now? Is this a good level? Quiet? Yeah, quiet. $27 is deaf. I'm gonna turn it up a tad. All right, you guys say it's good. Welcome, everybody. This is the inaugural episode of my big special Twitch show called You Don't Know Dick. So let's start out with just talking about how I conceived of the show and what the intent is here. So the idea is going to be that we will dive into a particular topic or theme together. Something I think that I know a little bit about, that I want to know more about, that I think I might be able to shed some light on, give you guys some context on a particular subject that interests me, but I might be too lazy to learn more about than I already do know, that I studied in college or I read about myself. And I want to explore it with you guys. And in fact, I was inspired to do this by some of my friend Dan Simpson's streams. So mods, if we could give a shout out to Dan Simpson. He's a great streamer and friend of the show. He does a lot of this. He is exploring leftism himself. He's a leftist, but he explores different topics in leftism in real time with his audience. And he learns. He's willing to demonstrate to his audience that he doesn't know everything. He doesn't have all the answers. And they learn together on his stream. And I kind of want to do something similar. I want to take a dive with you guys. I want to learn about something myself, teach you guys what I know already, examine things from a leftist perspective, and talk about them amongst ourselves. I think that will be fun. But today's topic, the inaugural episode of You Don't Know Dick, is going to be about the late, great Senator Huey Long. Now, Huey was a very controversial figure, let's say, out of Louisiana. One of the OG... Yes, this is a deep dicking. A deep dive with Dick is just a deep dicking, exactly. I don't know if I wanted to name the show a deep dicking. But we'll call it You Don't Know Dick for now. I had some other more vulgar names I was going to name the show, but I settled on this. This is better. But the reason we're going over Senator Huey Long in our inaugural episode, as some of you might know, we just lost a friend of our community, a comrade, to COVID. One of our mods who has been with Left Flank Vets Since the beginning, since we started streaming last summer, he found us early on and had been an active community until literally the day he went in the hospital with COVID, and we found out last week that we lost him to COVID. He was an incredible person and beloved member of the community, and it has hit us pretty hard. And we've been talking a lot about the best ways to honor him. And I remembered that as his namesake was, Senator Huey Long, he had asked me in the past, can we talk about Senator Huey Long? Can we talk about him? Can we talk about him on the show? Can we talk about some of his policies and stuff? And he didn't push real hard. He just kind of mentioned it, despite it being like his namesake. And I remembered that, and I started doing some digging online. And I never realized he actually had a whole YouTube channel dedicated to Senator Huey Long. And I started digging into it. I started to look at some of the videos. I started to research Senator Huey Long, and I was very intrigued by what I saw. I realized what I did know about Senator Huey Long was coming from a very warped perspective, let's say. There is a lot of misinformation from different sides about the senator, and I wanted to explore it a little more. So I did some research for this show, but like I said, I don't know everything about the senator. We're going to learn some stuff together today, and the whole show is going to be dedicated to and in memory of our friend, our fallen comrade, Senator Huey Long. With that, let's get started. I want to start with a video. It's not terribly long. It's about 25 minutes long. It's a little biographic video that I found on YouTube's that I think is pretty dang good. And we're going to stop. No misinformation, only dick information. Exactly. So what we'll do is I'll start this video. We'll pause it as we go. And I want to draw some parallels between the Senator Huey Long's journey into politics and some of the themes that we might tease out as they apply to today. All right. You live 5 minutes from the Huey P. Long Bridge. Damn, Mancom Soccer Mom. I didn't know that. The historical kingfish is basically the personification of Dude's Rock and all of its wonder and its horror. You ain't wrong, loathsome comrade. He is controversial for a reason, and we will talk about that. So let's go straight into the video. Let me get my little head to appear here. There we go. Now let's watch the video. All right.
American politics is rarely a setting for controversial heroes. Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Roosevelt. Public opinion has settled and congealed around these men, offering rosy soliloquies of their patriotic fortitude that echo throughout the generations. The American institution rarely examines the complex reality of its historical figures. That's simply not possible with today's protagonist, a modern-day Machiavelli whose quick rise and fall to power forces us to weigh his intents against his methods. He was a smooth-talking Louisianan who considered himself a righteous everyman, both before and after he took complete control over his state's political machine. He threatened assassinations, installed puppet governors, and ruthlessly taxed enemy factions, but it was all for the greater good of his people. Is there room in a republic for autocratic benevolence? Well, you be the judge while we examine the life and times of Huey Long. Huey Pierce Long was born on August 30th, 1893 in Winfield, Louisiana. Long's family was quite large. His mother, Caledonia Tisson, and father, Huey Sr., conceived 9 living children. Huey was the 7th. At the turn of the century, much of Louisiana was poor and uneducated, but even by local standards, Winfield was a tough place to make a living. The Long family was far from rich, but they were well off relative to their surrounding community. Huey Sr. and Caledonia made a living as livestock farmers and lived lived in a small southern manor house. The Longs rarely had much trouble making ends meet, but plenty of people around them did, which was a major influence on young Huey. One story recounts how, as an 8-year-old boy, he watched his neighbor lose his house and farm at auction when the neighbor failed to pay his debts on time. The farmer begged to be given his home back, swearing that he'd pay his debts if he just had a few more days to get the money together. Just as the sheriff was about to stop the auction and grant the neighbor's request, a creditor made a bid, winning the farm. As an adult, Huey Long recalled the events, remarking that he was horrified. "I could not understand," he said. "It seemed criminal."
I want to stop there. Now, this is like one of those stories that I don't know. It seems hard to believe. Like politicians will tell. Like it's a little bit in the camp of like, I said freedom kind of thing, right? But the overall like facts about Huey P. Long's upbringing are not disputed. He grew up like relatively middle class in a poor area of Louisiana, right? So while he was able to just live above the poverty line, have no like threat of them losing the house, they had enough lives. They were lucky not to be struck by some horrible, disease of foot and mouth amongst their livestock, so that they could actually keep a roof over their head and clothes on their back, food in the bowl kind of thing, right? But he did see poverty all around him. And he actually saw people beg on their hands and knees to please not take the roof over my head of the farms next to him. That very likely happened with a specific tale, like happened, and who knows. But the circumstances aren't really up for dispute there. So when he says, "I couldn't understand, it seemed criminal," that seems accurate and apocryphal. Yes, an apocryphal story. Exactly, Farquaad 67. Also, I didn't listen to the Dollop episode on Huey Long to prepare. I might have to check that out afterwards. I didn't know the Dollop did an episode on him. But the reason I wanted to stop too was to talk about how Huey Long's story isn't much different from my own, actually. I grew up in the woods of Maine, in a very poor area of the state in central Maine. So like along the East Coast, all the wealth is concentrated along the coastline. As you get inland, it starts to get like less and less prosperous, right? Because those are manufacturing town. Kingfisher Games is here. Thanks for the 100 bits, Kingfisher. Huey Long, a man so complex that every Hearts of Iron mods assigns him a different political ideology. Yes, he's a complex figure. We'll dive into like the different ways that he is viewed. But I have folks in Milo, Maine. I'm not even familiar with Milo. That must be another small podunk town out in the middle of nowhere. Manchester, New Hampshire, represent for E's dead. Yeah, so I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Maine, in a tiny mill town. There's used to be tons of paper mills all throughout the state. There's basically only a handful now, and the one that is still working is in the tiny town near I grew up. Like there's like only a few, but like this one is still operating. My dad was lucky enough to get a job in that mill, and the only way he could get that job. He didn't graduate high school. He went to juvie. Got his GED while he was in juvie. He worked minimum wage jobs for years. And the year that I was born, he got a job in that paper mill in the middle of nowhere in Maine because there was a strike happening and he scabbed. And that was the only reason I was able to grow up not in abject squalor. Like I had a middle class upbringing because my dad took a job from a union man when the strike happened. This was in the late 80s.
I am a phoenix rising from the ashes.
When the mills were all collapsing and when the union movement was collapsing. So it was the only way I was able. My dad had a good job.
I am a phoenix rising from the ashes.
And I was able to enjoy the spoils of that. My dad felt guilty about his whole life. His whole life. In fact, he's paying for it now, quite literally. Like that mill slowly destroyed his body. He has a broken spine, herniated discs. He tore a bicep, so he's got like a weird Popeye arm thing going on. He has a plate in his neck and he has a broken foot. He is hobbled. And the mill actually refused to say any of his ailments were work-related. And he basically can't stand or sit for more than 15 or 20 minutes. And when he left the mill, he was completely disenchanted with the idea of corporatism taking care of him. Now, he was disenchanted with unions when he scabbed because because they literally tried to kill him a few times when he was... I mean, tensions were high, as you can understand. The union did not like the fact that the mill had brought in scab workers, and they would try to prevent them from getting to work. They tried to run my dad off the road. And my dad looked at it as he was just trying to take care of his family, and he had no opportunity. Scab means a person who takes a job from a union man who is on strike. That's what a scab means. A scab is any person who defies a strike, basically, working during a strike. My dad, like I said, my dad was conflicted about it. What he tells me is, like, I tried to get into the mill the right way, and I couldn't get a job, and they called me when the strike happened, so I took it. And I still give him shit about it to this day. A lot of his family stopped talking to him when it happened. There are, like, my mother, the echoes of the strike were so prominent in that town throughout the next couple of decades that my mother had trouble getting a job substitute teaching at the local schools because she was married to a scab. Like, if the woman who was in charge of calling in substitutes was the wife of a striker, of a union man, then she intentionally wouldn't call the wives of scabs. Like, that's how deep the wounds were in the town. Like, I had friends' parents who wouldn't speak to me because I was the son of a scab. It was very strange growing up. In fact, I mean, my dad kind of taught me not to like unions when I was growing up. And then, of course, I got radicalized over time and just realized, like, how and my father himself radicalized me, realizing that how wrong he was about unions in general, wishing he had a union to protect him when the company inevitably fucked him. To make a long story short, like I said, my background, I felt like an affinity for Senator Huey Long, seeing poverty all around me, but enjoying the spoils of a middle class that was very precarious, like my entire life. Like, not realizing how good I had it, but seeing everyone who didn't work in the mill, everyone whose parents didn't work in the mill, worked at McDonald's, at a gas station, or some other local rinky-dink mom and pop shop that barely could keep the lights on. And they all lived in trailers and poverty. I was lucky I had a middle-class upbringing for that reason.
I am a phoenix rising from the ashes.
And he said, it seemed criminal. Winfield helped mold Huey Long in more ways than one. It wasn't just the abject poverty around him. It was also the unfiltered contempt that many of the northern Louisianans felt for their richer southern neighbors. As I said, Louisiana has never really been a wealthy state, but much of the money that it does have is concentrated in larger population hubs like Baton Rouge and New Orleans. Many people from quaint, poor North Louisiana towns like Winfield often resented the hoity-toity upper class that primarily resided closer to the coast. Take the Civil War as an example. Like most of its southern neighbors, Louisiana seceded from the Union and fought as part of the Confederacy in the American Civil War. When state representatives gathered for a vote on secession, delegates from Winfield voted to remain in the Union, not because of any forward-thinking positions on slavery or states' rights, but, as the Winfield delegate put it, who wants to fight to keep the Negroes for the wealthy planters? It wasn't a civil rights argument at all, it was class warfare. In the late 19th century, Winfield and the surrounding area became a local hub of populist politics. In 1912, the local parish actually supported the Socialist Party presidential candidate, Eugene Debs, over all other candidates.
Let's go. So let's talk about this at this point. Like, the video doesn't get into the yeah, Marcus, this is the extreme. How dare you? Well, welcome, Marcus. So the video doesn't get into the politics of race in Huey Long. Basically, what he's saying here is the politics of his local town, Winfield, where he grew up, didn't make a civil rights argument for the reason they didn't want to participate in the Confederacy of the Civil War, but they made a class war reasoning behind it. I did some research about Huey Long. There is a lot of controversy around his views on race. And basically, the somewhat of the consensus is that Huey Long avoided racial politics at a time when that was nearly impossible. In the South, especially. Basically, a lot of Southern politicians at that time yielded to the temptation to call upon the KKK to rally a base. But Huey P. Long never did that. In fact, famously, he said if a KKK politician was going to come to Louisiana to run against him, he said he was going to leave with his toes turned up. He was going to kill him. That being said, there's many an interview you can look up where Huey Long uses the N-word casually, not cool, obviously. Mostly he uses the lighter version of the N-word, which I won't say either. Yeah, he uses it in a context referring to a race of people as opposed to trying to state it in a directly derogatory manner, but obviously it doesn't really matter. The argument in favor of Huey P. Long is that his policies ended up helping black people in Louisiana, regardless if he intended them to or not. And that maybe because he was such a ruthless politician and so hard to pin down on where his politics actually lied, he would have thrown the black population under the bus if he felt it was to his advantage, but it never came to that. So he avoided racial politics almost entirely and just favored the class politics. In fact, a couple of times he did say that, I would treat, if I become president, which is Ames' word to become president, was that someone asked him, how would you treat black people if you were president? And he said, like any other person. He said, I would treat them like they would benefit from my economic policies like any other person. So let's get into some of the economic policies that he's going to develop, or his early life first, and then we'll get into that.
Candidates. It was not a place that trusted corporate priorities or power structures. Those who did have jobs worked in blue-collar industries at local lumber mills and salt mines. Huey Long's worldview was highly influenced by his childhood in Winfield. He was a curious child, exploring the farm and the world around him, asking questions and listening to political philosophy from a young age. Public schooling was sporadic in rural parts of Louisiana at the turn of the century, so Huey was homeschooled until adolescence, as was common for many boys at the time. When he finally did reach public school, he was initially praised as gifted with an uncommonly good memory. He routinely asked teachers to allow him to skip coursework or even entire grades when he was already familiar with the material. At Winfield High, Huey...
That's a really good way to state it, Kingfisher Games. He never would have adopted a position with the aim of benefiting the African-American populace explicitly, but he never would have avoided a position because African-Americans would benefit it from alongside everywhere else. Because he basically... those terms were utilized largely like black is today.
I am a
material
phoenix
conditions
rising
give
from
more
the
weight to the
ashes.
terms of context than the actual term. Yeah, that's a great point of context there, Marcus. Yeah, I mean, basically, he viewed it as it would have been political suicide for him to explicitly advocate for civil rights at this time. This is early 20th century. This is 50 years before the civil rights movement. This is the guy who, if he was still around when the GI Bill was written, would have extended it to all veterans. Yes, exactly. Yes. Let's keep going.
Began to really use his intelligence on the debate team. At one point, he traveled to Baton Rouge and finished third in a statewide debate contest, earning himself an academic scholarship to attend LSU after high school. Unfortunately, he would never be able to cash in on the winnings. He couldn't afford the textbooks or the room and board. Huey would return to Winfield.
So get this. He wins, he debate lords himself into a scholarship and literally cannot go to secondary school because he can't afford the room and board and the textbooks. Cannot afford the basic necessities he would need to go to school, even though his tuition was covered. Sound familiar? People can't even afford tuition. Never mind. The only reason I went to college, despite me being relatively middle class, like I covered before, was because I had the GI Bill, because I went and did imperialism. The only reason. And the only reason I was able to go to use the GI Bill was because the post 9/11 GI Bill had a stipend which paid me to go to school. It covered my textbooks, it covered my room and board, and it covered my tuition. If all three of those things hadn't been covered, I wouldn't have been able to do it. The Montgomery GI Bill, prior to the post 9/11 GI Bill, only covered a percentage of your tuition most of the time. That was it.
With his only remaining prize being all that increased female attention that skilled high school debate club winners are accustomed to. Huey soldiered on throughout his remaining coursework, graduating from Winfield High School in 1910 after completing the 11th grade, or at least that's what he thought. Just as Huey Long finished the 11th grade and was set to receive his diploma, the State Board of Education passed a new law saying that the 12th grade would be the new ending point for high school students. Huey, the skilled debater as he was, thought that the new law was a crock of crayfish, and he began circulating a formal petition denouncing the idea of 12th grade and formally criticizing the principal and teachers at Winfield High. Ultimately, Huey got his wish. He never had to complete the 12th grade because the school expelled him. As a result, he never graduated from high school.
So let's cover this real quick. He fucking tried to debate Lord himself out of senior year of high school, and he was such a king and dedicated to this particular cause, and every cause he was ever dedicated to. He just went and got himself expelled. Like in early stages of life, he was combating the establishment, being like, this ain't fucking fair. I have to do 12th grade. I just graduated. I should have graduated right now. You changed the rules of the game as I was trying to play it. And that ain't fucking fair, so I'm going to help change those rules. And he got yeeted for trying to change the rules. This will be a common theme you'll see throughout Huey P. Long's life.
With Huey Long's high school education officially over, he knew he needed to find a job. Like a lot of Biographics protagonists, Mr. Long was a multi-talented man who could adequately perform quite a few tasks. He would sign up for just about any job that didn't involve farm work. He wasn't keen on chores around the house as a child, and he wasn't about to sign up for any more of it as an adult. Long wanted to be out in the world, around people and things. He never wanted to end up back at home, surrounded by chickens and goats. So at the age of 17, Long became a traveling salesman, touring much of the American South and selling everything from cooking sherry to home medicines. It was a job he had quite a bit of natural talent for, and as such, he found success right out of school for a solid year. But as the economy stalled and sales became harder, Long was forced out of his budding young sales career and forced to consider a new line of work. His mother, who had always hoped her seventh son would use his God-given intellect and communication skills in a more righteous calling, pushed him to move to Oklahoma so that he might move in with his older brother George and study the Bible. In the fall of 1911, he began attending seminary lectures at Oklahoma Baptist College in Shawnee. Well, attending lectures is a rather loose way of putting it. Long quickly deduced that he was no man of the cloth and began skipping classes. He washed out of seminary school after one semester, much to the chagrin of his devout Baptist mother. But before he left Oklahoma, he thought he might want to give law school a try. George lent him $100 and pointed him towards the University of Oklahoma's School of Law, where he similarly lasted one semester. He received average grades and didn't learn very much thanks to a slew of distractions ranging from girls to gambling. He enjoyed the local political scene in Norman, where the University of Oklahoma is, but he never focused enough on law while he was in town to really get serious about a career in litigation. He lost his $100 and a gambling ring leaving town to return to a promising sales position that had opened up for him. Long was still a teenager when he left Oklahoma, but he had a real mind for sales. He learned early on that dressing well lent a salesman credibility, and that playing music could help him draw a crowd and foster a commercially appealing atmosphere. He tapped into his natural powers of empathy to connect with potential clients. As a traveling salesman who encountered working-class people all over the American South, he quickly developed a sense of fellowship with everyday Americans. There was another relationship that Huey Long was quickly developing too, a blooming romance with a woman named Rose McConnell. Long and McConnell met in 1910, early in his sales career, at a bake sale that had been organized in Shreveport to promote the sale of a lard substitute called Cottolene. Huey had a little bit of game, so he awarded the top two prizes to Rose and her mother. They married 2.5 years later on April the 12th, 1913, at the Gayosa Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. They went on to have 3 children named Rose, Russell, and Palmer. Sales remains a good career choice for Long, but it also continued to prove inconsistent and fickle. In 1914, the economy again threw Huey and Rose out of the industry and back toward formal schooling, but
So, like I said, Huey Long tries to graduate from the 11th grade, says, I'm about to graduate high school, I can go out into the world, dope. The rules change, and they say, actually, you got to do the 12th grade. He gets pissed off, tries to change the rules and say back to what they were before and say this ain't fair, don't send me to 12th grade, gets yeeted for that. Now, Huey Long becomes a very successful salesman. He's great at his job. He figures out how to do sales. He connects with people. He's very empathetic. He gets better at music as a way of attracting people and then sells them shit. And just when he gets good at that, multiple times, the bottom drops out of the economy and he gets yeeted out of that job despite doing everything he was supposed to do correctly. So, continued theme.
this time, he had a much clearer plan. His eldest brother, Julius, who was already a working attorney, helped him create a streamlined law school outline specifically targeting course material that he would need to know in order to pass the bar. Huey and Rose moved to New Orleans, and just 3 semesters later in 1915, Huey had cobbled together enough knowledge and information that he was able to pass the bar exam. He was 21 at the time. Long returned to Winfield, where he now had the legal tools he needed to grind his axe against the corporate interests that he had grown to loathe over the course of his young life. He began building his reputation as a lawyer by representing poor, powerless, or disenfranchised Louisianans. He opened a law office in the space above the Winfield Bank, which was run by his uncle George. He promptly sent waves through both the community and his own family by representing a widow in court against the very bank he shared a building with. His uncle
king shit. So he graduates law school. He's pissed about the ruling class that has fucking undercut him at every stage of his life, and he's watched make other people's lives even more intolerable than his own. He's tried to get ahead. He's tried to play by the rules. And then he starts a law practice above a bank that his uncle owns, and then says, fuck you, uncle. No uncle magic is happening here. You suck, you're part of the ruling class, and you're trying to fuck over this widow. I'm going to represent her against you in court. King shit. Absolute king shit.
Was incredulous that young Huey had taken the case, as it appeared to represent a conflict of interest.
No, you're right, Marcus. He didn't graduate from law school. He learned enough to pass the bar. He figured out, what is the shit I need to know, with his brother's help. And then he was like, to get the test, what are the rules of the game? I'm going to learn how to use the rules of the game in order to get by. Because I know that just getting this degree doesn't matter much. Passing the bar is what matters. I
am a phoenix rising from the ashes.
Huey remarked that his uncle should feel complimented. Huey Long don't take out after top waters, but after the big fish. Cajun metaphors and third-person speech aside, Long was a gifted lawyer. He quickly gained notoriety in northern Louisiana as an attorney who wasn't afraid of
king shit or king shit. I'll let the viewer decide. Am I saying king shit or kink shit? I don't know. Who knows?
Targeting powerful groups, making him popular among many of the local populists. In 1918, after 3 years in Winfield,
I think you do have to graduate to get a
JD now, where they had more clients and more resources at their disposal. He also began one of his life's...
Oh yes, welcome to Ancom Soccermon. She's a stabby now. She's mod. Ancom Soccermon hath been mod. Welcome her.
Biggest conflicts, his ongoing standoff with John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company. Around the time that Long moved to Shreveport, he also invested about $1,000 into a local well that eventually struck oil. Long was set to make a major profit off the investment, but Rockefeller Standard Oil wasn't interested in buying the oil from this particular well, making it theoretically valuable but practically useless. Long had made a sizable investment and gambled correctly, yet he still lost his money because of the whims of Standard Oil.
Once again, Huey P. Long saw, if I invest in this oil well, it is going to be profitable. I know that because oil is profitable, right? And he had made the mistake of making an enemy of Standard Oil by representing people who were fucked by them previously. And then the rules of the game changed. Standard Oil said, you know what? We're just not going to buy that very valuable resource from you to fuck you specifically, Huey P. Long. The rules of the game changed right out from under him once again. And he decided, I'm going to fuck Standard Oil as hard as I can throughout his life. It just made him angry. If there's a lesson to be had here so far, it's just get angry like Huey P. Long was about the people that are fucking you. That's okay.
Oil. His righteous anger, alongside his established animosity towards power and corporations, touched off an ongoing feud that he would continue to stoke for the remainder of his life. He called Standard Oil an invisible empire that was run by petrolumites. He made his first formal shot across the bow in 1921 when he began representing a small oil company who had a disputed lease with Standard Oil. Long lost this court case, which only fueled his hatred more. But there was one interest for Huey Long that captured his attention much more than legal battles and oil wells. What began as a natural curiosity for politics had grown into a full-fledged career interest, and Long was no longer contented to attack the power structure as a private citizen. He wanted to do it as an elected official. Now, just before we continue with the video today, I do want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, War Thunder. War Thunder is a realistic free-to...
We're going to skip the advertisement for War Thunder. If you like the video game, the online video game, War Thunder, you go ahead and play. But I'm not getting paid by them, so Biographics can take that money.
If you're new, you're probably just going to get your ass whipped over and over again, so maybe start an arcade and go from there. So join us on the battlefield for free using the link below. Doing that...
And a king.
Huey Long officially became a politician when he earned election to the State Railroad Commission in 1918 at the age of 25. He used his position on the three-man board to limit corporate monopolies and reduce utility rates for average households. He believed he was the sort of populist everyman that 20th century American politics should rely upon. Just as Long had quickly gained local acclaim as a populist-minded attorney, he similarly gained statewide notoriety for the hell he raised from his elected position. The State Railroad Commission was eventually rechristened as the broader Public Service Commission, and Long became its chairman in 1922. His first act was to sue the Cumberland Telephone Company for raising their rates by 20% for no particular reason. His first attempt lost, but he argued his appeal before the US Supreme Court and won. Cumberland was forced to cut refund checks totaling $440,000. This was distributed to 80,000 customers who had been overcharged. Subsequently, Chief Justice William Howard Taft described Long as the most brilliant lawyer who ever practiced before the United States Supreme Court. The Cumberland case won Long thousands of statewide fans, so Long decided to run for governor in 1924. As he had done his entire life, he mocked the ruling political establishment in New Orleans, labeling them as toothless pawns of malevolent companies like Standard Oil. Ultimately, he finished third in the race, missing the runoff by about 7,000 votes. Long blamed the poor weather, which wasn't an entirely unfair observation on his part. With only 200 and some miles of paved roads in all of Louisiana at the time, heavy downpours transformed dirt roads into intractable muddy messes. Given that the core of Long's base was the rural populist contingent, the weather almost certainly impacted his showing to some degree. But the weather wouldn't be a problem 4 years later, when Long successfully took the mantle from acting governor Oromel Simpson.
Look at this chode. Look at this chode. You can absolutely. This is big Virgin energy, right? Chad, Huey P. Long versus Virgin Oromel Simpson.
By 1928, Long had carefully constructed a massive populist alliance in Louisiana. He spent 4 years traipsing across the isolated northern parishes, building his coalition by a dozen blue-collar workers at a time. He also improved his reputation in the more gilded southern parts of the state by supporting Roman Catholic candidates in an area dominated by traditional Spanish and French heritage. He tied everything together with a slogan he adopted from 19th century.
You know, just like by supporting people like Biden, you know, the persecuted Roman Catholics, which kind of was still a thing at the turn of the 20th century. Like, Roman Catholics were kind of a persecuted minority still, but like, we're 100 years from then. It's not happening anymore at all. Hasn't been for many decades.
Populist William Jennings Bryan. Every man a king, but no one wears a crown. Long once
Every man a king, but no one wears a crown. So Huey P. Long popularized every man a king for the 20th century, but he stole it from William Jennings Bryan.
the Democratic primary election on January the 17th, 1928. Despite the fact that it was a heated three-way election, Long won by what was at the time the largest margin in state history. Predictably, he went on to cruise in the general election, winning more than 95% of the vote over Republican candidate Etienne Clair.
Let's go.
At 34 years old, Huey Long became the youngest governor in the history of Louisiana,
24.
a record that still holds to this day. Long's ascendance to the governorship was a radical departure for state politics. Since Louisiana had become a state 116 years prior, it had more or less been governed by the same corrupt members of the Good Old Boys Network in Louisiana, all
Good
of
Old
whom
Boys
had clear
Network.
ties to the church, the
Literally
upper class,
called that.
or powerful corporate interests. Long's election undid all of that, giving the average Louisianan a much more accessible ally in the governor's mansion. And most Louisiana residents needed that ally. In the late 1920s, Louisiana was arguably the poorest state in the US, with grossly underfunded public works and public education systems. Those who could afford to navigate their children to and from school every day still had to purchase their own textbooks, among other supplies, making regular old primary schools a huge burden.
I'm
for most
9
families.
feet tall.
25% of adults
record.
could not read. Massive bridge tolls limited people's ability to move around in their own communities, and poll taxes had disenfranchised poor people of all racial backgrounds. And keep in mind, these were the good times. This was in 1928, just months before the start of the Great Depression. Everything
Wait, Lonesome Comrade, you got to give the Every Man a King speech once as part of a political ploy while playing a bard in the D&D game? Oh, that's fucking dope. I fucking absolutely love that. We're going to watch some Huey P. Long speeches here in a minute. We saw one at the outset, if you missed it. We did a short one, part of his famous barbecue speech. But we'll listen to a little bit of radio addresses and some shit here in a minute, just so you guys can hear his awesome, he's an amazing orator, and he is very animated, and he has the best Louisiana accent too. It's like it's good shit.
was about to get a whole lot worse. Long had solutions to many of these problems, but his methodology is what catapulted him to national fame. Almost immediately, he fired hundreds of old guard bureaucrats, replacing them with friends and young populists who he believed would serve his vision of what Louisiana politics could be. After consolidating his executive power and installing yes-men everywhere he could, he began an ambitious 1929 legislative session designed at pushing through a number of bills that he had promised in his campaign, focusing on economic stimulus and improved state infrastructure. He lowered one bridge toll from $8.40 to 60 cents. He instituted
How do I get in
night
on your
courses
D&D
for
games,
adult
you
literacy
guys?
that taught more than 100,000 people to read by the
Please
end of his
tell me.
term. He levied a new tax on Standard Oil that paid for all textbooks for grade school children. Long was undoubtedly enacting large-scale wealth distribution, a political prospect that rarely succeeds on American soil. But Louisiana was so fundamentally broken by 100 years of corruption that most everyday people didn't seem to mind. That's not to say that everyone was on board, however. Long's strongman methods were well-meaning, but they were also
I want to play that part again right quick. This is an important piece of context here.
textbooks for grade school children. Long was undoubtedly enacting large-scale wealth distribution, a political prospect that rarely succeeds on American soil. But Louisiana was so fundamentally broken by 100 years of corruption that most everyday people didn't seem to mind.
Large-scale wealth redistribution, which normally doesn't succeed in America because there are a collaboration of forces that will defeat it. But most everyday people didn't seem to mind exactly because things were so bad. Exactly because things were so bad. We are 100 years later, and things have gotten bad. So, maybe some lessons to be sussed out here.
That's not to say that everyone was on board, however. Long's strongman methods were well-meaning, but they were also democratically dangerous, and it didn't take long for an organized political movement to rise up against him. In 1929, while Long was trying to levy
boofed
a new
Louisiana.
occupational license tax against his friends at the
Yes, Boof is the wealth redistributor. He keeps the lights on at all of Left Twitch. Boof is the Senator Huey P. Long of every human a boof. I will say Every Man a King is gendered, obviously, but he did add to the song Every Girl a Queen, too. We'll watch a clip of it. He collaborated with a women-led orchestra, a women-led band, and had her add Every Girl a Queen, too. So there is to be, and that's at the early 20th century, so something to be said for that.
Standard Oil Company, his project was met with cries of foul play. Opponents in the legislature called for an impeachment on the grounds of abuse of power, among several other charges, and the impeachment was sustained
Lonesome, if
with
you're working on a new
67 to
concept for a
13
new
vote.
D&D
When
thing,
some in the
please let me
pro-long
know in
camp
the Discord.
discerned the electric voting
If you're
machine
looking for
used
some
for
players.
the impeachment vote may have been tampered with, an all-out brawl broke out on the floor of the State House, which was locally christened as Bloody Monday and reached its crescendo when Huey's brother Earl bit a legislator on the neck. No word on whether or not Earl Long was secretly a vampire. I assume this will be covered in a future season of True Detective.
He fucking bit a dude on the neck in the middle of a state house brawl. Let's go. Politics used to be cool, you guys. People used to beat the dog shit out of each other. Don't forget mods over streamers. You're right, Clouded. The proletariat over the bourgeois.
I
Proletariat
am a
mods
phoenix
over bourgeois
rising from the
streamers.
ashes.
You're right, Clouded.
Regarding the ongoing political charges, Huey continued to speak directly to the people of Louisiana, where he knew that he could best plead his case. This money he was trying to earmark was for them, the people, and it was a good cause, social programs that would help lift Louisiana out of the ice.
Also, I said, why doesn't he says it should be covered in a future season of True Detective, when the True Blood reference was right there. Like, True Blood literally takes place in a fictional town in Louisiana, and there are vampires. Come on, dude. I think you got it confused. It must have been just a confused reference.
Grips of poverty. Ultimately, the State House passed 7 articles of impeachment to the Senate, which immediately declared its intent to acquit Long of the charges, regardless of whether or not he was guilty. In their eyes, the impeachment should have never gone forward in the first place, and they were treating it with the lack of seriousness that they thought it deserved. In all likelihood, Long's 1929 impeachment was organized in backrooms by oil tycoons and wealthy titans of industry who wanted to rid themselves of the Long nightmare before any more damage could be done. There were no lessons here for Huey Long about politics or democracy.
No collusion. You cannot convict. How do you convict a president of collusion? How do you convict a governor of collusion? When he's doing great, fantastic things for the people. I will say that, like, I'm obviously being sarcastic, but in my research, there were a ton of people trying to compare Huey P. Long to Trump in, like, some of, like, the reviews of his biographies and shit, which is so fucking dumb. Like, right-wing populism and left-wing populism, like, Huey P. Long is a left-wing populist. Like I said, there's lots of debates about where you would categorize him, and even he refused to, like, put a name on it. But he, as you can see from his policies,
I know you're hoping
is
and
a left-wing
praying
populist.
that maybe we'll have another war, but it ain't
Oh,
happening.
thank you for the tier 1 at 4 months, Pork Nickel. Appreciate you being around that long. What up?
Democracy, only power. He doubled down on his authoritarian strategies, committing to violence, intimidation, and ruthless political operation to accomplish his populist goals. I used to try to get things done by saying please.
Pretending to be busy and watching our stream is praxis, Pork Nickel. You get 12 socialism points and 100 stolen valors for that. You're welcome.
Huey Long told the press. Now I dynamite him out of my path.
So this is going to be the beginning of a theme. Well, I mean, you're seeing it already, but like his quote right here. Let's go back a little bit. I used to try to get things done by saying,
Huey Long
please.
told the press. Now I dynamite him out of my path.
So this is a theme about Huey P. Long. People will call him authoritarian. They will call him a dictator. But Huey P. Long understood what power was and the ramifications of not wielding it, of refusing to wield it, because the good old boys network and those above you have all the power intrinsically as part of their institutions and their networks. If you don't wield it, if you play by the rules, they will fucking cut you down. And that is why Bernie is not the president right now, right? That being said, Huey P. Long doesn't meet the greatest end either.
Over the remainder of his term, Huey Long effectively transformed his status as governor into that of a local dictator. The ends will justify the means, he told people. He continued replacing appointed officials all around city and state governments with populists that he felt were loyal supporters whom he could trust. He also began a political tithe that he called his war chest. Anyone who received a job from Huey was forced to give up a portion of their salary for a private fund that Long kept locked away for either campaign needs or personal projects. Long also surrounded himself.
This is the sus thing. This is where Huey gets into a little bit of grift here, right? Accommodating, like making sure that you pay into a personal war chest that he controls, which he did use for personal projects that were redistributing wealth. But the fact that he was also, dipping into the till is not a cool left-wing thing to do. Not something I think that we should be supporting. That's just corruption, right?
With armed bodyguards at all times, in part for show and in part because he had begun to receive death threats. It's an understandable reaction.
Yeah, Huey and Stalin, both pretty racist and homophobic personally, but I mean, that was par for the course at the time. Everybody was fucking racist, homophobic, transphobic, yeah. Par for the course at the time, unfortunately. Not an excuse, but a reality.
But when you look like a strong man and walk around like a strong man, you start to act a little bit like one too. At one point, a drunken Long allegedly told one of his bodyguards to kill State Representative J.Y. Sanders Jr., leave him in a ditch where nobody will know where or how he got there. Long still had lofty populist goals, but had also become an obvious autocrat who was hell-bent on amassing as much political power as possible. In 1930, with half his gubernatorial term still remaining, he decided to run for US Senate, selling his campaign as a referendum on his political ideology. If you liked what he was doing for Louisiana, he asked that you also vote for him for Congress. If not, he would resign the governorship. Long was running against 72-year-old incumbent Senator Joseph Ransell of the Constitutional League. Long routinely mocked his opponent, declaring him a member of the Constipational League.
Owned. Now, my opponent in the Constipational League thinks that just imagine how owned you would be if someone called you the Constipational League. You're some fucking monocle-wearing, ice-chewing psychopath who's owned by Standard Oil, and the Chad, Huey P. Long, comes up and tells you you're a constipated piece of dog shit. Owned.
Huey Long eventually won in a landslide in September of 1930,
we'll see you, Lonesome.
earning
Thanks for coming by.
57% of the vote.
Therapy's
but
important.
Long stayed in Louisiana, fearful to cede the power he had amassed to his lieutenant governor by assuming his new congressional position in Washington. He presided over hellish state legislature sessions by screaming at those who disagreed with him, ordering them to sit down and shut up. One night, Long steamrolled 40 bills through the state house in under 2 hours. He had so thoroughly stacked the state bureaucracy in his favor that no one could effectively speak against him. It was in these final dictatorial days as governor where Long finally earned his infamous nickname. A political supporter dubbed him the Kingfish, after a smooth-talking character from a popular fictional radio program called Amos and Andy. The name immediately stuck, beloved by friends and foes alike, including Long himself. Long fended off a slow-moving coup in 1931 when his own lieutenant governor, Paul Sear, announced that he did not believe Long could be senator and governor at the same time. Sear declared himself...
Now, he's kind of right. Like, you can't really be a senator and a governor at the same time. But Long was like, these fuckers, if I cede control of the governorship, the people of Louisiana will suffer for it. So while Long had greater ambitions about becoming president and obviously affecting national policy as a senator, he recognized the importance of state politics, which is another lesson I think we can be learned here. Yeah, he is kind of right. You can't be both. Like, it's very hard to be a governor and a senator. That's two very much full-time jobs, more than full-time jobs. But I think the lesson we should draw here is, yeah, all politics are local politics, like Marcus said. Like, Huey was able to greatly affect the poor population of Louisiana for the better. by ruling over state politics with an iron fist. He was able to galvanize a populist movement to improve people's lives in his state. And that's why he was beloved. That's why he was able to become a dictator. I mean, like I said, problematic for a bunch of reasons, but if there's a lesson to be sussed out here, that Huey P. Long shows us that you can improve people's lives for the better, even if it's just at your state.
To be the rightful governor of Louisiana, which, regardless of whether he was right or wrong about the legality of Long's dual statuses, was a pretty...
No, Long wasn't a tanky. He didn't call himself a communist. He made no overtures to Stalin or anything. In fact, the commies would, in the United States, would try to call him a fascist. They would try to label him as a fascist. They would, in fact, this might sound familiar to you, they would say his gestures, the way he did motions and stuff in his speeches, was reminiscent of Hitler. So that's why you should be sus of him. Even though he was completely anti-corporatist, unlike Hitler. It's just like trying to draw his body language as some kind of indication that he's some kind of fascist. No, he's a populist leader. He's a populist, somewhat authoritarian, yes, but authoritarian and egalitarian.
I am a phoenix rising from the ashes.
There was no ethno-nationalism about his politics.
Stupid plan. Long had the National Guard surround the state capitol.
I don't think he worked with Debs. I think he just endorsed them.
Arguing to the state Supreme Court that Sear had resigned his duly elected position when he attempted to assume the governorship. With Sear gone, Long installed a puppet, Alvin Olling King, who temporarily assumed the governorship as...
Yeah, imagine like your lieutenant governor is like, you can't do both jobs at once, and you have your hands on all the levers of power at once. You say, okay, dink, that little turd is gone. Let me install an actual king, Alvin Olin King, in my stead.
Long left for Washington in 1932. Huey's long-term puppet, Oscar Allen, won the full job in the gubernatorial election of 1932, as Long settled into his senatorial duties, still completely in command of Louisiana state politics. As Long pivoted to national politics, he supported fellow progressive Franklin Delano Roosevelt during the election of 1932, believing he was the only candidate with policies that could shepherd the U.S. through the Depression. But after FDR won office, Long actually became a major critic of the New Deal, attacking Roosevelt's flagship legislative package from the left. He believed that FDR and his Depression-era policies were not doing enough to redistribute wealth in America. Roosevelt's, in turn...
Fucking based. Imagine that. The most left-wing president we've ever had, FDR. The guy who created the New Deal, which we use as a standard for what we could achieve now in terms of improving our infrastructure and a jobs program. Huey P. Long was like, that's fucking weak sauce. More. Let's do more. Based.
Labeled Huey Long as a radical demagogue. Long spent his time in the Senate advocating for free college tuition and seeding the ground for similar grassroots movements across America that helped him rise to power in his own state. In February 1934, he launched a radical initiative.
Yes, FDR did create concentration camps. You are absolutely right, Riviera. Well, he might have been the most left-wing president and probably the best that I can come up with. He also made internment camps for Japanese Americans, which is something that must be remembered and condemned.
Called the Share Our Wealth campaign that might still be the most radical left-of-center idea ever seriously floated by a major American politician. Long wanted to cap personal annual incomes at $1 million and cap personal for...
The bar is on the floor, Marcus. Capitalism reform is weak sauce. The bar is on the floor.
Fortunes at $50 million. The resulting tax income would help build a guaranteed household income for every American family. Long took care to remind Americans that 65% of the country's wealth was controlled by 2% of the population. His plan would aggressively attempt to smooth those numbers.
I'm going to draw a theme here, too, from today to then. 2% of the country's population controlled 65% of the nation's wealth. And as you know, the numbers now are somewhere between 1% of our population controls 90% of the wealth. So talking about how Huey P. Long was able to enact a bunch of wealth redistribution legislation in his state because things were so bad that people didn't mind, and a populist movement actually had enough power to make that happen with his authoritarianism at the head of it. There's a distinction to draw. Things were bad then, things are much worse now.
Out offering every family a month's paid vacation, old age pension, and guaranteed 30-hour-long work week, among other benefits. It was, to be sure, a radical plan, even by New Deal standards. When the US Senate refused to seriously consider his proposal, he started a private society, the Share Our Wealth Society, which attracted more than 7 million members by 1935.
Based. When he couldn't get traction for his particular policy, Share Our Wealth, which is a radical left-wing policy in comparison to anything we've seen today or then. Like I said, left of the New Deal, which was problematic, like you brought up in the chat. It was basically for whites only, and FDR was literally interning Japanese Americans in concentration camps. He decided,
I am Phoenix rising from the ashes.
Because there's no traction for this in the Senate, I'm going to make a grassroots movement. I am going to create the Share Our Wealth Society with chapters all around the country to champion these policies at the ground level, and hopefully that'll seed some future legislation and campaigns.
Unfortunately, Huey Long would not live long enough to reap the political benefits of his ideas. He published his first book, Every Man a King, in 1933, and had begun writing a second tome called My First Days in the White House that made it pretty clear where his personal ambitions lay. But on September the 8th, 1935, Long made his way to the Capitol building to vote on House Bill No. 1, a rezoning plan whose meta goal was to oust a judge named Benjamin Henry Pavey that Long considered a political opponent. Long and his allies passed the bill late that night after 9 p.m. Shortly afterward, Pavey's son-in-law, Carl Weiss, approached Long and shot him one time in the chest. Weiss died almost instantly after Long's bodyguards shot him more than 60 times.
Dude got one shot off, tagged Huey in the chest, and then his bodyguards ventilated him 60 times.
Himself died at the hospital more than 24 hours later after doctors were unable to successfully repair the internal damage to his body. There are conflicting reports over what his last words were, but one theory...
Oh yeah, there was an unsolved mystery about his murder. Yeah, there's some debate about whether or not one of his bodyguards might have accidentally shot him in the process. There's a lot of debate about that. It doesn't really matter. It killed him, like whether Weiss missed or one of his bodyguards tripped and fell or there was a ricochet or something. The result was he died.
Reports that they may have been, God, don't let me die, I have so much to do.
God, don't let me die, I have so much to do. Huey P. Long had his aim at the White House to carry the flag further than FDR did in terms of left-wing policies. If there's one thing that's a constant in this oligarchy, it's that every single person who challenges the oligarch's consolidation of wealth is assassinated. You are 100% right. The bodyguard that shot him was JFK in the limo and the mysterious... I haven't heard about that. He's dead.
He was 42. Long remains a controversial figure in American history because of the lengths he went to consolidate power and advance the populist legislation. There is little doubt that he is a beloved figure in Louisiana. More than 200,000 people attended his funeral, and his body was buried on the grounds of a new state capitol building, which he directly helped fund with one of his tax initiatives. But outside of Louisiana, on a national level, Long is often remembered for his authoritarian strategies and his radical economic initiatives rather than his statewide benevolence. He took money by force and used it to improve the lives of blue-collar Americans, and he scoffed at the checks and balances that are designed to constrain political power. Huey Long remains one of the ultimate American Rorschach tests for Machiavellian principles. As Long once noted, the ends can justify the means, but that's an awfully dangerous mindset when your sworn enemies have pistols.
The ends can justify the means, but that's an awful dangerous mindset when your enemies have pistols. Like Marcus said, your ends can justify the means. You can do some shit. You can wield the levers of power in order to increase, the wealth, in order to enact policies of wealth redistribution. But remember, the wealth you are redistributing belongs to people who have pistols, who have power. You might have levers, but they have guns. And like Marcus said, every single person who has coalesced any sort of movement to do something similar to this has ended up fucking waxed one way or another.
So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Brand new videos just like this a couple of times a week. Also, please do check out our fantastic sponsor.
So I thought this video was great. This is Biographics with host Simon Whistler. Somebody said that they watch Simon's videos to go to sleep, which I thought was funny. He does have a very, like, I don't know, soothing voice, I guess you could say. And I thought it was pretty balanced. I thought he was like made a good argument that like you say what you want about the man.
Phoenix rising from the ashes.
He did redistribute that wealth. He has like 8 channels. Damn. Yeah, I'd never watched anything by him before. Like Rage Against the Machine said, he turned the power to the have-nots and then came the shot. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, he's a great presenter. I thought it was pretty even-handed. That's why I wanted to show it. Like, we shouldn't shy away about criticism of even leaders that are beloved of the left. We critique Bernie, we critique AOC, we critique every fucking leftist that there is. We critique each other, critique ourselves. That's shouldn't be an issue here. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are lessons to be learned. There are policies that were enacted, like the legacy of Huey P. Long, which we'll talk about some more here in a minute, is like black Louisianans were greatly assisted by a lot of his policies, despite him not directly targeting them. So there's a lesson to be learned here, obviously in the interest of equity. Everyone, don't forget critique Dick, please. Yes. Critique. Yes. No gods, no masters, no podcasters, no streamers. You should not hesitate to critique anyone here at Left Flank, myself included, especially. What did you guys think of the video? Did you guys like it? Do you think it was a good balanced critique of Huey Long? Will I pull up the next thing here? Tell me what you think. I'm the only big special boy above reproach. Oh, Mr. Peanut's behind me. I cut him out of the video accidentally, though. He's on the wall. You just can't hear. I'll show you. Right? There he is. You see him? I'll turn myself a little bit so you can see Mr. Peanut. All right. There. I was trying to set this up so I could be comfy. And also, like, you got big special boy face tonight, right? So close you can see the eczema on my forehead. I hope you guys are enjoying. Normally I'm just a little quarter square, so you get the full dick experience, up close and personal. You get the full dick pic. Why can't we read your slut sign? Oh, there's a glare on it. It says Bernie, you ignorant slut, but there's a glare from a light. I can't help the glares, you guys. All right, I'm going to go freshen up my drink, but I want you to listen to this beautiful song, Every Man a King, while I do it. I'll leave autoplay on because it'll probably take me more than 2 minutes, but listen to Huey P. Long's, a new version of it that I'm actually getting directly from our boy, Senator Huey Long's, the mod, the Fallen Comrade I mentioned at the outset. This is his YouTube channel, which is very popular.
I am a Phoenix rising from the ashes. 7K
subscribers. So a lot of love for Huey P. Long. He was a mixed bag, like I said, and our boy, obviously, as a Louisianan himself, thought there was a lot of good stuff to be learned about the senator. So we're going to honor that today, and we're going to listen to a little bit of music. Uh-oh, what did I just do? Well, I freshen up my drink, and I will return momentarily. Oh, you want a link? Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Give me a second. Here's a link to the video I'm about to play. And that is his channel. So just click on his video, or click on his little profile pic at the bottom there. We're going to go through some of his YouTube videos here in a moment as well, after, like I said, I freshen up the drink. Oh shit, here we go. That should work. No? Why? There we go. All right, let's listen to Every Man a King. I'll return momentarily, chat.
Why weep or slumber, America, land of brave and true, with castles, clothing, and food for all belongs to you. Every man a king, where you can be a millionaire. But there's something belonging to others. There's enough for all people to share. When it's sunny June and December too, or in the winter time or spring, there'll be peace without end, every neighbor a friend, with every man a king.
Sometimes the life of a single...
No, we are not talking about Thomas Cochrane, the craziest sea captain in history. Actually, what we should do, though, here. I played this song at the beginning, but I want to play it again now because it's really good. I hope I don't get DMCA'd for this, but I'm going to play it anyways. Because it's a fucking dope song. Let's listen to some Randy Newman. Kingfish. Gotta have a talk with Dick. No dark mode? What do you mean?
100,000 Frenchmen in New Orleans.
My browser, you mean? In dark mode?
In New Orleans,
that.
there are Frenchmen everywhere. Your house could fall down, your baby could drown. Wouldn't one of those Frenchmen care? Everybody gather round, loosen up your suspenders, hunker down on the ground. I'm a cracker, you one too. Gonna take good care of you. Who built the highway to Baton Rouge? Who put up the high school and built
That's tomorrow's Mardi Gras.
Who look after shit kickers like you?
Fat Tuesday.
Kingfish do. Who gave a party at the Roosevelt Hotel?
His voice makes me think of Toy Story.
Like the whole North half the state down there for free. People in the city had their eyes bugging out, 'cause everyone looked just like me. Here come the kingfish, kingfish. Everybody say, here's the kingfish, kingfish. Every man a king. Who took on the stand at all men and whipped ass,
With the hands.
just like he promised he'd do. Ain't no stand at all men gonna run this state. Gonna be run by little folks like me and you. Yes, the kingfish. kingfish, friend of the working man. The kingfish, kingfish, the kingfish gonna save this land.
It's a dope song. I like it. Yeah, I can't listen to Randy Newman without thinking about Toy Story. That's my thing. Let's listen to. We're not going to listen. It's 42 minutes long, so we're not going to listen to a whole thing. But I want to listen to a little bit of a radio address from Huey P. Long on wealth inequality. All right, and put your questions and comments into the chat as we're listening. We'll stop and talk about them as we go. Okay.
Every man a king. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Huey P. Long, United States Senator from Louisiana speaking. I was formerly the governor of that state before becoming the United States Senator. Prior to that time, I was for some 10 or 11 years engaged in the work as the Public Utilities Commissioner for the state of Louisiana. I will speak to you on the economic problems affecting this country's present day and time. As I have previously stated over the radio, and as I have said in speeches which I have delivered on the floor of the United States Senate, which I hope some of you have had occasion either to hear or to read, our condition in America today grew from a condition by which a few people became possessed of more than they needed, resulting in a large number of our people becoming possessed of what they required upon which to live. I am not going to undertake to say that all who hear should agree with me.
Oh, did Huey Long said if fascism comes to America, it would come on a program of Americanism? I didn't know that. Yeah, well, he was very critical of fascism, despite the fact that he was accused of being a fascist a lot, which I think is patently false. Fascism is distinctly right-wing ideology, and there are people on the left and the right that will try to convince you otherwise in order to beat down candidates who hit them from the left. Libs fucking do that shit. Hi, Abby. Welcome. We're talking about some Senator Huey Long.
I will not quarrel with those who have ideas of government contrary to those which I entertain. But to those of you who believe in the Bible, I may say in advance that I will have no argument whatever in reaching the same conclusion as you do, if you will consider such facts as I will lay before you. But realizing that there are many who do not accept the Bible as being divine, and that also there are many who have no particular creed or religion, I will discard that and say that those of you who believe in the works and the sayings of the Greek philosophers are those of you who agree with the theories followed by Lincoln and by Jefferson.
Yeah, that's a good point, Spaz writes. He was also critical of communism. He viewed his politics as a last-ditch effort to appease the masses to avoid communism. Yeah, basically, Huey P. Long was saying, like, you consider my policies radical. You'll call me a communist. But the alternative is a communist revolution. Things are so fucking bad in this country that you will be overthrown. A communist state will rise up. Capitalism, unless you allow me to bring it to heel, bring capitalism to heel, allow people like me to do so, you will lose it entirely. And I don't think he was wrong I don't think that calculation was incorrect. I think he underestimated how effectively the capitalist institutions and the people who despised him would be able to collar us. It's been a very successful project for them. Things are worse now. You're right. Yeah, he was anti-socialist because this was a time of Red Scare, right? Like communism was not popular. This is the time of the Palmer raids and shit, right? Like he had to be distinctly anti-communist in order to exist as a political entity. And it worked. I mean, despite him being called a communist by many people. We can be critical of that. I mean, there are many people like there are many people in left flank who, and in a chat right now, who call themselves communists. I call myself a socialist. And that's just how I refer to it. Although we all pretty much believe the same things. I just prefer the term. But he lived in a time where it would have been impossible for him to become as powerful a political figure and do as much good as he did if he wasn't distinctly anti-communist, despite him supporting policies that many communists did, basically. I call myself
and by
sexist.
Christ,
Self-love is
those of
important.
you who believe in the doctrine of the Pilgrim's Father, those accepting such teaching will have no occasion to disagree with anything that I say or with what I am undertaking to do in this country today. Now, my friends, I have been one of the two men undertaking to compose a music.
Yeah, communism is the goal for English. You're right. But I would argue that there, and Marx
I am
argued
a
too, there are
phoenix
stepping
rising from
stones
the
on the way to
ashes.
communism.
Rendition. I don't know how you will like it, but before I proceed further, it has been my good fortune many years ago to make the friendship of Mr. Harry Lincoln, who is the president of the
I am a
world's
phoenix
greatest
rising from the ashes.
publishers of music. And I'm going to ask Mr. Lincoln to play and to sing for you the song which I helped to write, entitled Every Man a King, before I proceed further. Mr. Lincoln.
I love the song.
Why weep or slumber, America, land of brave and true, with cattle and clothing and food for all belongs to you. Every man a king, for you can be a millionaire. But there's something belonging
What up,
to
Sal?
others.
Welcome.
There's enough for all people to share. When it's sunny June and December dew, or in winter time or spring, there'll be peace without end, every neighbor a friend, with every man a king.
Song fucking slaps. You're right. Help, I started dancing and I can't stop, says Abby. We're dancing together. Like I said, he also added Every Girl a Queen to the song. It's not just Every Man a King, Every Girl a Queen.
There'll be peace without end, every neighbor a friend, with every man a king. Now, my friends, in the year 1916, President Woodrow Wilson asked the Congress of the United States
All
to
women
allow
are
him to
queens. You're
appoint
right, Cowabunga.
an Industrial Relations Commission to determine what was the cause of industrial unrest at that time prevailing in America. And the Congress passed
I'm going to turn
such
this up a little
authority
bit.
upon
I got the
President, and
YouTube
he
max, but
appointed
I'm going to turn my audio up.
an Industrial Relations Committee. And at the conclusion of
Bernie
a
still
number of
remembers
months
the day this
later,
broadcast aired.
they reported that the chief cause of the trouble existing at that time was that 2% of the people owned 60% of the wealth, and that 65%
Hydrate.
of the people owned less than 5% of the wealth of the United States. They also said that there was a middle class of about one-third the people who owned about one-third of the wealth. And that middle class, I take it, was what was more or less holding hair and hide together at the time of this report of 1916. But to sum
That's
up,
1916, where this report is describing a middle class that would be wiped out entirely by the Great Depression. There's debate about whether there's ever really, you can consider a middle class because of the precarity of their position entirely throughout the 20th century and before and prior. But even if you want to suppose that a middle class existed in
Then
the
they
early
did
20th century,
dumps. They call them dumps, big, massive dumps.
Thanks for the host, Swamp Fox. Even if you want to, 105 years ago, 1916 was when this report was done. even if you want to suppose there was a middle class at the time in 1916, it was entirely wiped out by the Great Depression. And it has never really recovered. You could argue that it may have recovered somewhat in the 60s with some of the more egalitarian tax codes that existed, like the 90% tax rate that existed under JFK. But Reaganism did an end to that.
Of what that report said way back there, nearly 20 years ago, under President Wilson. What that report said was that our chief trouble then was that 2 men owned twice as much as 98 owned, and that the great bulk of our population, 2/3 of all of our people, own less than 1/20th of the entire wealth of this country. Now, as bad as that condition was, when 1900
I thought he was the reincarnated Napoleon. I didn't know
we
that.
found a condition twice that bad. And when 1935
That's some megalomaniac
rolled around,
shit.
we found a condition far worse than it was in 1930. I was in 1929 standing in the lobby of the biggest hotel in the South, the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans, Louisiana. And a gentleman who was a president of one of the big banks of this country walked up to me and said to me, Governor, I was at that time the governor. He says, Governor, we've had a terrible stock crash today. Everything has fallen. The bottom has fallen out. And he said I would advise the state not to undertake to sell any bonds or to float any securities for a week or two until this condition has abated. I said, well, do you mean to tell me that the stock market has had a great crash today? He says there's never been anything like it in history. I said, then I want to tell you that
maybe Huey P. Newton for next episode. I haven't decided
in any
yet.
week nor 2 weeks, nor in any 2 years, nor 4 years, nor 5 years, unless and until there is a redistribution of wealth. What I prophesied about that time was later printed in the newspapers down in the state of Louisiana. Also, Mr. Heck, for it was he to whom I was speaking in 1929. Mr. Heck, I was later told, reported to the board of directors of the Hibernia Bank what I had said that day. Of course, my prophecy was more or less given the general ha-ha, because everybody thought that was something that was just happening by accident, and that it would clear up as other things had cleared up in a short period of time. But my friends, back in 1917 and in 19...
The show is not limited to the Hueys of the world.
I was not prophesying from wisdom when I said and when I wrote and published to the world the statistical data showing that day by day and year by year, the rich were growing richer and the poor were becoming poor. And I said that the day of economic chaos could not be delayed beyond 15 years, and that it would most likely occur within 10 years. That was in 1916 and 1917, and some of those articles were written even as late as the year 1990. And I might say that I continue.
So Huey right now is talking about his prediction that the stock market would crash. Basically, that he is not from a particular place of wisdom of understanding the stock market, but understanding that its underpinnings were, it was built on pillars of salt and sand. It was bound to collapse. And he predicted that collapse when he was told about a particular downturn in the stock market.
Continued to point out those conditions and those trends of affairs until as late almost as the day when the final crash came in 1929. So when the World War came on in 1917, it may have been that the condition of the concentration of wealth was accentuated by the war, or it may have been that the war postponed the final day of reckoning. But be that as it may, everything occurred between the 10 and 15-year period as I had originally anticipated. Now, ladies and gentlemen, after this report of 1916, which was just before we went into the World War, and just before I had begun to make my statements as to what we could expect to happen, after this statement of 1916 by the Industrial Relations Commission, we waited for another report as to what was happening to the ownership of our wealth until the Federal Trade Commission, it was, published its annual report of 1930. And in that report, this agency of our United States government said that, gauged upon what the decedents left, that it appeared that 1% owned 59% of the property in the United States. That meant that in the 14 years which had elapsed between 1916 and 1930, that instead of conditions improving, that whereas 1% owned 59% of the wealth in 1930, it was 2% that owned about 59 or 60% in 1916, 14 years before. So in the 14 years' time, from 1916 to 1930, 1% owned what 2% owned in 1916. Also, that middle class that existed in 1916, that was about 1/3 of our people, that owned about 1/3 of our wealth. That middle class of 1/3 fell to 1/4. It fell to 1/5. It fell to 1/6. And today there is not a middle class of 10% of the people in the United States that own 10% of the wealth of this country. They have
Yeah, some old-timey speak is fun, Kami Abbey. Electric Meal subscribed at tier 1 for 3 months. 3-month streak. What up, Electric Meal? Oh, if we get a hype train going, we can do cat jams. All right, we can do cat jams for like some Huey P. Long related tunes. I have a few queued up. But right now, he is describing the shrinking of the middle class. He's like saying this middle class shrank from
I know
1/3
you're
to
hoping
1/4,
and praying
1/5,
that
1/6.
maybe we'll have another war, but it ain't happening.
Huey Long lo-fi mix. Let's go. I don't know if I have the skills to pull that off. I would love to, though.
either been found, that middle class of people, they have either been found to have fallen into the lower strata, or else
Request
some
a cat jam you made.
isolated few
Abby, send it to me
have managed to
directly
work themselves
via
up
DM in the
into
Discord.
the
We'll
class
see.
of luxury and multimillionaires. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we waited from 1930 for the government
Long
to make
remix
another
beat? Let's
report
go.
by which we could be shown from these accredited government statistics as to what was happening to the national wealth. And this year, 1935, a report was made by the concern that guarantees the bank deposits for the government. It is named the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation.
It is scary.
And this report
100
made
years
this year,
ago.
1935,
Same
I
fucking
personally
shit.
have a shrine to
that
Hillary
it had
Clinton.
Only
found
worse now.
that 1/150th of the people owned 67%
Thank you for
of
the
wealth,
cheer. Marcus is always right.
gauged by bank deposits.
50 biddies.
That is, of all the money in the bank, 2/3 of 100th part of our people owned 67% of all the money that was in the bank. That was 2/3 of 1% of the bank depositors. That doesn't tell the entire story, because I would estimate that there are half of our people who don't even have a...
I like that he combines like the fractions with percentages, just like Bernie does. Like the top 1% of 1% of 90% equals we're fucked. Like he he does the same, like combining. It's somewhat confusing, but it does help provide like a proportional context for the types of wealth inequality he's describing.
a bank account. And so it is twice as bad as the
It is
statistics
scary and infuriating.
of the
You're
Federal Deposit
absolutely right.
Insurance Corporation would indicate. Well, there's other things that I might say to indicate to you what we say is happening to our national wealth, as to how much the common people have and to how much the richer class has. If you noted from your public press some weeks back, from the income taxes paid, it was found that there were fewer people of moderate income and more people of the millionaire income than they were a year ago.
Oh.
Indicating the gradual trend of the times, that the masses became possessed of less.
The closed captioning
And
algorithm
the
is pretty good,
multimillionaire
but it's
and
not
billionaire
perfect, especially with an
becomes
old-timey
possessed
radio
more
broadcast.
and more as time goes on. Well, my friend,
Oh, what up?
those of you
Megabytes
who
with
may remember me in the days
400
of the
biddies.
Chicago
Thank you.
Convention
Appreciated.
of 1933, when we were nominating a president of the United States.
The contradictions have.
Those of you who remember me may recall
social democracy
that I
is
was
not
one
the
of
job.
the big four or big five or big six.
I absolutely agree with you. At the very least,
Credited
democratic
with having
socialism
shaped the
as
course
one step in the
of
right
the
direction.
Chicago Convention, wherein I was nominated by the Democratic Party, Mr. Franklin D.
I
Roosevelt,
personally have a
for
shrine
president
to
of
Hillary
the
Clinton.
United States.
One up from
And
Baton
we ran
Rouge.
Mr. Roosevelt for president. Upon what platform?
Red Stick Redhead
I'll
out of
give
Baton
that to
Rouge.
you in just a moment.
You know what we're talking
Mr.
about.
Huey P. Long, United States Senator from Louisiana.
Oh, we get some old-timey...
Every man a king.
It's Every Man a King again.
A millionaire. But there's something belonging to others. There's enough for all people to share. When it's sunny June and December too, or in the winter time or spring, there'll be peace without end, every neighbor a friend, with every man a king.
Yeah, this is the new Lil Uzi. Smoking unfiltered cigs and drinking bathtub bootleg gin, baby. Let's go. Shaolin rock. Truly rocking. And come
Oh, my
on, got the
friends,
fleur-de-lis.
continuing my speech, because you have just heard again my friend Harry Link, president of the music publishing house of Donaldson, Douglas, and Gumbo,
It does low-key rip.
play
kinda like
one
Tom.
of the
You're right.
particular pieces that I undertook to help compose, entitled Every Man a King. And since you've heard that, I hope you'll try to remember yourselves. I will continue along the line as to why we were undertaking to nominate and later to elect
Happy
Mr.
Lundi
Roosevelt,
Gras.
and upon what platform we were
What
basing
up?
his
Mardi
candidacy
Gras tomorrow,
for the
everyone.
presidency of the United States in 1933. We had seen this condition. There
Frozen
had
as fuck
developed
here,
in
so this
America
makes me happy.
under Mr.
It's
Hoover
cold here, too.
and under Mr. Coolidge and Mr. Harding and under them all backside. I will not undertake to say how far back this could go, maybe back 50 years, for all I know. But there had developed a condition in which the American people were in need in the land of plenty. People were starving for food, of which this country had an abundance. People were crying for clothes, of which we had too much. Men, women, and children were crying for homes in which to live, notwithstanding the fact that we had too many houses in which the people could at that time been living in.
Literally everything he just said you could say today and it would ring absolutely true. People are starving even though we throw away food. People need clothes who are freezing even though we have too many clothes. And people are homeless despite the fact that we have many, many, many empty homes.
And so Mr. Roosevelt was picked by us as a candidate for President of the United States. And the platform upon which he ran and upon which we based his candidacy was that he promised that we would go out and make our search and locate the trouble affecting the forgotten man. And that instead of there being starvation in the land of plenty, that we would cut down the size of the big men's fortune and give something to the balance of this people on which to make them comfortable and upon which their children could be educated. So we made the race for Mr. Roosevelt, the President of the United States, on that time. But he has been elected.
Red Stick Redhead said, Huey P. Long got roads to my granddaddy's farm in North Louisiana, and Earl got us the charity hospitals till Jindal shut him down. Fuck that Jindal, absolutely. Fuck you, Bobby Jindal.
This is now the third year of Mr. Roosevelt's president, and the conditions are today worse than they were at any other time. Now, I don't ask you to take my word for that. I would ask you to accept no information whatever. except such as might be directly accredited by the department serving under and with the approval of Mr. Roosevelt himself. What do we find today? Why, there are today in the United States 1 million more men unemployed today than there were 1 year ago. That's according to the accredited departments that are accepted by the government. We find further that according to the United States government's own...
Spazright says, in my humble opinion, it seems Long was an autocrat above all else and saw how fucked up our society was and chose left populism as a vehicle to advance himself with the credibility that he was advancing the worst off as well. Who knows, Spazright? You might be right. But even if that's true, that's better than you can expect from almost any politician. His opponents were much worse, yes. And like I said, every modern politician is worse in comparison. Even if he was riding left-wing populism for his own personal gain, which he definitely did gain from. He materially improved the lives of many people and laid a foundation for other movements after him. Not that they've necessarily been successful, because the bar is on the floor, as we've talked about. But it's better than most, especially at that time.
Statistical data. That there are 5 more million
We're going to switch over to his barbecue speech here in a minute.
Than they were 1 year ago. And I think I may well tell you that there are another 5 million trying to get on those rolls today who are not permitted to place themselves back. Well, what else do we find? We find that an indebtedness in this country, public and private, that means debts owed by the United States and by the people individually, all of which amount to $252 billion. That means that every man and every woman and every child owe at this time $2,000 apiece. There used to be a time back in the country where I was...
Holy shit. Did you just hear what he said? Every man, woman, and child owed $2,000 apiece. Holy fuck. I haven't watched this before, so that is that is new to me. Every man, woman, and child owed $2,000 apiece. Holy fucking dog shit. Damn. He's referring to wealth distribution in general. We are referring to, obviously, the goddamn checks we were promised. Fuck. That's crazy.
When we heard that a baby had been born, we rushed to the home of this newborn babe to carry it a present. Some of us would take it a baby rattle. Some of us would give it a silver cup. And some might give it a spoon. So that with these meager possessions, a child came into the world. These were possessions which it might treasure as keepsakes in the mature days of life. What do we do today when a baby is born? Do we rush to the home of the parent? Shower it with presents? Is that the...
He knew he had to be on the attack rather than on defense. Yeah. I mean, he fundamentally understood something about politics that many people didn't. We used to have a Huey animatronic at the museum downtown, and he'd sing. Oh, man. This is 1930. One of Senator Huey Long's radio addresses in the early mid-1930s, probably around 1934. I think he says this year, 1936, actually, we just heard. People licking boots so hard today about how long the rollout has taken, says Riviera. Yeah. Yoo-Hoo Zippy says $2,000 in 1930 is equivalent in purchasing power to about $31,327.19 today. An increase of $29,000 and some change over 91 years. Dollar had an average inflation rate of 3.07% per year between 1930 and today, producing a cumulative price increase of 1,466.36%. Googled it. Damn. Oh shit, Shaolin Rock did beat you. Sorry, I saw your longer message. Yeah, that's like UBI. Exactly. I didn't see the people licking boots online today, Riviera, but that doesn't surprise me. How long the fucking rollout's taken, considering we just got our fucking asses handed to us with the impeachment. I shouldn't say us. The Dems did. They fucking laid their own... They made their own bed. They got to lay in it now. And even the libs are mad about it.
Gift that we still make? Oh no. That's all been changed. Today, when the baby is born, before it breathes its first breath of life on earth, we tie a $2,000 debt around its neck. And 95% of them struggle through life and are never able to discharge their part of the debt before the time of their death.
He's saying a $2,000 debt hung around the neck of a baby when it's born at that time. Medical debt.
And demise from this earth. Well, my friend, we find this condition prevailing. We find, I am very sorry to say...
That's a great quote for English. Those in power can kill 1, 2, or 3 roses, but they will never be able to stop the coming of the spring. You're right.
No hope for the future that there is to be erected under the present system of things, according to the lights before the power to be. Now, my friends, when I went to the Congress of the United States and became a member of the United States Senate in January 1932, I proposed a remedy for this condition. I didn't expect it to pass at that time, so I spoke for it most earnestly. I said at that time, as I had said for many years before, that the depression with which we were then afflicted could not be ended by the nostrums and expedients being employed, but that unless we took from the captains of big fortunes part of their swollen wealth and transferred it through the sinews of the government into the hands of the masses, that the abnormal condition with which America was at that time afflicted would not be abated. So I proposed in the United States Senate, in the form of a resolution, that the fortune of all big men be limited to a few millions of dollars to the man. That no man be allowed to inherit in his lifetime from his father or mother, or from his grandfather, grandmother.
Can someone in the chat do a calculation for me? Like, in 1936, how much was $1 million worth in today's dollars? Someone do that calculation for me? Put it in the chat.
Anyone else more than a few $1 million in a lifetime. And that no man be allowed to make more than $1 million in any 1 year. The purpose of that resolution was that we might pass laws, the effect of which would be that while we might have millionaires and men worth 2 million and men worth 3 million maybe, and men worth maybe 5 or 6 million, but that nonetheless there must be a limit on how big any one man could get in order that there could be something left for the balance of the people. I was condemned for offering that resolution.
It's about 20 million, Shaolin Rock?
About 6 votes in
okay.
the Senate that day. We went ahead thereafter and elected Mr. Roosevelt. Then I offered my resolution again, somewhat reformed. It received nearly 20 votes.
Got the math.
But it had the opposition of Mr.
Thank you for showing your
Roosevelt
work.
and the leaders in Congress and of the Roosevelt administration in general, notwithstanding that laws to that effect had been promised by the president when he was a candidate.
So to be clear, what he's proposing, a limit on only making $1 million per year in 1936, equivalent to today, is around, let's say, 18 million. Well, no, let's just round it up to 20. I mean, it's around 19, actually. No, thank you, Giuseppe. I appreciate you Googling it. That's, imagine if we could just cap people at that. Imagine if we could just cap income at 20 million. Everything above that's taxed. I mean, what detriment would that have to our society? What detriment would that have? What can you do? What can't you do with $20 million as an individual? That's not even a company. That's an individual. What can't you do with $21 million that you can do with $20 million? And tell me that someone needs that much money. 20 million cams of Rippets. Let's go, Shaolin Rock. If you're not familiar with Rippets in the chat, please Google them. They are, they kept many of us alive when we were in the military.
For that all. Of course, we were led to believe that time that later on Mr. Roosevelt was coming along with it. But we waited and we waited and we waited. We waited the first year. He didn't do it. We waited the second year. He didn't do it. And we started into the third year, and we were met by a news dispatch from the United Press, in which Mr. Roosevelt was placed upon record as saying that he had set his face against any more taxes upon the big rich for fear that it might interfere with his so-called recovery program that he had in mind for the people of the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, as much as I regret, I must say to you that hope from Mr. Roosevelt's administration appears to be practically extinct, and there is no need that we should wait longer. We must again take up the cudgel. We who are now in the third year of Mr.
How many
Roosevelt,
people could you redact with the caffeine
we
containing
who
20
are in
million
the
cans of
throes of a
Rippets?
worse depression than's ever existed.
I don't know. I tried to calculate that when I was in Afghanistan. I'll tell you, Riviera. I was drinking like 6 of those motherfuckers a day.
Given us the power to produce, that mankind should have the power to share. We who have made that fight must not become discouraged. We must take up the cudgels and the torch again. Fight for a few more years, if that may be necessary.
Doing field research.
Bring about what we were promised.
Be careful, Riviera. You get kidney stones that way.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, if I may be permitted
Also,
to be bold,
caffeine withdrawal is a thing.
and I do not consider that it is being bold,
I watch guys go through
I
it.
might say to you that we've
And
been
kidney
fooled
stones.
by the promises of the Republicans. And we have been fooled by the promise of the Democrats. And while I am a Democrat, and while I am a party man, nonetheless, the welfare of the American people is paramount. We cannot place our head in the hole to follow anybody except what is necessary for the relief and deliverance of humanity and justice. Why should we here be struggling in this condition
Why?
with more unemployment than we've ever had? And is the unemployment only as bad as we have been told it is? Is it only 1 million more people who are out of work today than there were 1 year ago? I say to you that there are a great deal more people out of work.
He is absolutely right about the way we calculate the unemployment rate does not factor in a lot of different things. For example, anyone who goes on Social Security or disability is removed from the unemployment rolls. Anybody who has stopped looking for work after a certain period, anybody who has taken part-time work because they've stopped looking for a full-time job is not counted on those rolls either. The unemployment rate is always higher than they tell you it is, even when it is already high.
Than 1 million, over and above what number were out of work last year. Why? Because the statistics upon which we say, rather upon which they calculate, that there are 1 million more men unemployed today than there were a year ago, are more or less industrial statistics. And they do not take into account the fact that there are thousands and hundreds of thousands and maybe millions.
All right, we're going to be wrapping up soon, so I want to switch to the barbecue wealth redistribution speech, okay? One of his more famous speeches.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to realize speech in my life. I don't mean by that I got any money for anything I said. I've on several occasions had the particular honor of being invited to make some speeches that I was supposed to get some kind of an honorarium for. I started to say moratorium. And
he made a joke about honorarium versus moratorium, meaning honorarium is money you're paid to give a speech, as opposed to moratorium, which is for someone who's dead, which turned out to be a little bit prescient of a prediction there for Mr. Huey Long.
Conclusion of each one of those speeches. One time over in Cleveland, I was to get $250, and one time in New York, I was used to get $500 or $600, $700. But my conscience wouldn't allow me on either of these occasions to take the money. Now, however, I've never made a free speech. I never made a speech unless it was before a
Free
court.
speech, let's go. Free speech.
Or before a crowd where I was trying to get votes. Or before an audience where I was trying to get converts. And I am probably
You will hear about this guy from weird right-wingers sometimes, Vanya Hub. You will. This guy transcends traditional lanes of politics. You're not wrong about that. He is a controversial figure who defies classification, but there are distinctly left-wing things about him when it comes to wealth distribution that we can suss out definitively from his politics. Riviera says they did the calculation. Okay, so it would take 68.2 cans of Rippets to redact an average adult man. So 20 million would take out 293,000 adults from caffeine. Riviera, can you show your work in the Discord to people? That will be relevant to a lot of people in the Discord. Also, if mods could, if you want to join our Discord, mods, can you put the link to the Discord? Anyone who's watching here, you want to continue the conversations we're having now? There's a lot of great people in the Discord having crazy conversations like this. And I will say, we will be starting a movie night. We're going to do a movie night in the Discord. I don't know when, but I'll let you guys know ahead of time, all right? Of when we're going to do it. But I do want to do a Four Lions Discord movie night. We'll watch the movie Four Lions together, okay?
Addressing for the benefit of the work I am pursuing, the most important and probably the farthest reaching organization that I've ever had the pleasure of speaking to. Because you are the people that have the contact with the American people. So I'm not leaving my beaten path. I'm going to take the time to explain to you, as best as my limited ability will permit me, what I'm undertaking to accomplish in the United States Senate. Of course, I've had a double purpose. First thing I've had to do is fight for the right to stay there, and I managed to make pretty good.
Damn, he's good.
But if you'll permit me to backtrack...
No one puts their hands in the pockets like that anymore.
That's been
With
my
the front
lot in
pockets
every
there?
position I've ever held. I was elected railroad commissioner of Louisiana in 1918. And they tried to impeach me in 19...
So I just want to point out, too, that our boy, Senator Huey Long, our fallen comrade and mod, he pieced together some historic films to give you the full barbecue wealth redistribution speech, because on YouTube it was basically just clips you would have to piece together and watch individually of his speech. But our boy Senator Huey Long put them all together.
1920.
There's a decent Burns doc on Huey from the 80s if y'all haven't seen it.
Then
No,
died in
I haven't. I'd love to watch that Red Stick Redhead. Could you put that in our Discord? If you're not a part of our Discord, we'd love you to join and put that in the
When I
Discord.
wiggled through that, I managed to become governor in 1928. And they impeached me in 1929. And in 19...
I swear you can hear our boy Senator Huey Long laughing at the actual Huey Long's jokes just now when that's playing. You can hear him laughing at his jokes in the background. That's beautiful.
1930, I was the National Democratic Committeeman.
Didn't Goodman play Huey P. Long in the Made for TV movie in the 90s? I don't know if there that. I mean, that sounds right. He sounds like he would make a good Huey P. Long. He does a good Southern gentleman. But there was the famous, well, it's not famous. It's not a very good movie. Sean Penn and, what's her name? Fuck, I'm forgetting her name. The Kate from Titanic. They did All the King's Men movie, which was very critical of Huey P. Long about him being a dictator, basically. It's been a long time since I've seen it. But, yeah, that was basically showing him in a very, very negative light.
And they moved
Winslet,
to unseat
Kate
me
Winslet,
that
thank
same
you.
year. And as you probably know, they pursued me to eliminate me.
That is Marcus is always right, not the actual Marcus. I literally confused this account with the actual Marcus earlier, talking to him. I asked him about something that you said in the chat, Marcus is always right, and he was like, what? I realized, oh no, that's not the actual Marcus.
Me from the United States Senate for a couple of years after that time. I have the pleasure to undertake to describe to you.
A bottle of capitalistic champagne responded.
Holy shit. King. No, champagne didn't pop. Ignore this narrative. It's actually a flash bulb. Somebody was taking a picture. This was so old that the old-timey flash bulbs used to explode. He had that fun, am I shot in the face? Yeah, exactly. That is the look that you get when you don't jump from a thing, but you think you're, oh, I've died. It's been a long time coming. Someone has murdered me. I have been killed. That look like, oh no, and the pleasant realization that pleasant or horrified realization that you're still alive. That's what just happened.
It proved only that nothing fazed the kingfish.
You see that?
Capitalistic champagne.
You see that bomb didn't
Oh, no.
explode till tonight.
There's such thing as champagne socialism.
According to the
Come on,
tables
man.
which we have assembled, it is our estimate that 4% of the American people own 85% of the wealth of America.
Well, it's actually 1934, says Senator
Of
Zealand.
the people of America
Our boy
don't own enough to pay the
put
debt
lots of
that
good
they owe.
context in here to make sure
Our
that you know.
United States government, under the auspices of Woodrow Wilson, then the president, undertook to find out what was the trouble in America with the people generally. They appointed an Industrial Relations Commission headed by Frank P. Walsh of Kansas City, Missouri. They made an intensive study, and at the conclusion of that study, they reported that the chief cause and the chief trouble with America was that a small percent of the people owned a large percent of the wealth. Now you'll find that in the report of 1916 published by Congress. In other words, Woodrow Wilson's administration in 1916 said, too few have too much. Too many have too little. They gave a table. They said that 2% of the people own 60% of the wealth. They said there's a middle class of 33% that owns 35% of the wealth. They said that 65% of the people own less than 5% of the wealth. That's
Lonesome. I am once again asking you to donate to my campaign Train Booze Foundation Fund. Stop it, Lonesome.
2 million people own more than 110 million people.
Wait. Prosecco is the sparkling wine of the people. You're right, Burnout Cook 41. Absolutely. Italian champagne. Italian excellence. Prosecco. Let's go.
That was the finding of our industrial conference, serving under the appointment of Congress and Woodrow Wilson, the president. And it's there. I propose a limitation on the size of fortune, both ways. I propose a limitation on how big a fortune can get, and a limitation on how little a fortune can get. I propose that a third the average is the small. 1/3 the average is the small. I propose...
He's saying a third of the average income. So a sliding scale. If you were to take the average income in the United States, there'd be no man who would be allowed to drop below the poverty line, which is established as a third of the average income.
That none should be over a few millions of dollars. A capital levy tax to be levied. The first 1 million not to be taxed except as it is now taxed. The second million to be taxed 1%. The third million 2%. The fourth million 4%. The fifth million 8%. The sixth million 16%. 7th million 32%, the 8th million 64%, the 9th million 100%. To mean that no man with that tax levied against him every year can possess a fortune.
I'm going to turn off the closed captioning here since the video is subtitled. But think about how reasonable this policy is. A capital levy tax to be levied, the first 1 million not to be taxed except it is now taxed. So the current tax rate for all earnings under $1 million. Second million, 1%. Third million, 2%. Fourth million, 4%. Fifth million, 8%. 6th million, 16%. 7th million, 32%. 8th million, 64%. And 9th million, 100%. That is an incredibly reasonable tax rate. Basically saying you can earn up to $9 million before we take all of it. This is what some people fail to understand about our current tax system as well, is that it is bracketed. He is describing the brackets, is that you will be taxed only as much as current for your first $1 million, and over the second, we will tax the second $1 million an additional 1%, third million additional 2%, fourth million an additional 4%, and so on. That's incredibly reasonable. Why do you need that much money? Discount Seth Rogen says, conspiracy theory. After being shot, he actually survived. Huey knew another attempt would immediately be made, so he faked his death and knew the progressive movement must go on, so he moved to Vermont and started organizing there under a new name. Oh, that would make Bernie Sanders like 120 years old, bro. I like that, though. That's a good one, Discount Seth Rogen.
Of more than from $3 to $4 to $5 million to any one man. Now, what's that going to mean? That's going to mean that within 2 or 3 years' time, the United States finds the treasury of the United States in possession of $165 billion of the wealth of this country.
That was the plot of MGS5?
$165 billion.
I think you mean MGS4.
Then, we start from the bottom. That the
I'm going to put closed captions back on.
25 or more million American families shall have a homestead. Louisiana has a homestead. Florida has a homestead. Texas has a homestead. That every citizen in the United States shall have a homestead. Up to $5,000. 1/3 the average wealth per family. Not like Mr. Brisbane.
Oh, shit. Can you imagine? Every man a homestead if he wanted? Fuck what I wouldn't give for that. I'd love to have a homestead. Turn the closed captions off again.
Said when a man has to misstate the fact, he's probably run out of argument. My friend off the Brisbane don't state the facts any longer. He argued with me a while, but he couldn't meet the facts. Now he has to misstate the facts. Just 20-1 for the truth. In other words, 19/20 of what Mr. Brisbane says is a lie, and 1/20 is the truth. That's all. We're not going to destroy the Gulf Refining Company. We're not going to destroy
Coming back.
the Standard Oil Company. But we're going to...
Yes, like cottagecore. Every man and woman a cottagecore. Exactly, you zippy. Every human a beehive, says Lonesome Comrade.
say that the limit of any one man stock ownership in the Standard Oil Company...
So this is where his gestures are compared to Hitler, too. He speaks emphatically and with his arms, like a good orator does in the 20th century. Like, basically, you'd be called a psychopath, like doing a Howard Dean Bial if you did this today. But this was how you got people to listen to you back in the day. Especially when you're doing a populist movement.
Here's from $3 to $5 million to that individual, and that the balance of the people of America...
I bet you can get a homestead in the old logging land out near Township 54, says Hughes dead. Yeah, there are townships in Maine which are literally unincorporated land, which don't have, like in the northern parts of Maine, up in the county, Aroostook County. I could probably afford a homestead up there. I could probably buy one. Hughes dead. You're not wrong. Yeah, but in terms of me being able to have access to the things that I needed to keep the homestead running, I'm not sure I could. It'd be hours and hours drive just to get to a fucking convenience store, you know?
The balance of what the Standard Oil Company's worth. All right. Then what are we going to do? We're going to guarantee if our plan succeeds, and it is, don't fool yourself, it's going to win this country. It's going to win this country. Not 1940. It won in 1932, but we didn't get it.
Dwight's speech from The Office.
That's
the
right.
wheels of change are fueled by blood.
We're going to say then that every family in this country is entitled to the Florida and the Texas and the Louisiana homestead right, up to $5,000 or 1/3 the average. A home and the comforts of a home, including an automobile and a radio, the things it takes in that house to live on. Now,
Goddamn.
if you have planted upon that table
Our boy, Senator Huey Long, did a good job cutting this together. It's just hard to keep up with the closed captions.
the food and the clothing and the products that it takes for 125 million people to live on, any man with a simple full of sense ought to know that if you take 85% off of that table and give it to one man, that you're bound.
This is a colonialist proposal, says Spaz Rights? What do you mean, Spaz Rights? Do you mean like in the sense that they are taking imperial gains and redistributing them? Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, I mean, we're still an imperialist country. Redistributing that wealth is naturally, it's blood money coming from imperialism. You're not wrong about that.
To have 2/3 of people starving because they haven't got enough. How many men ever went to a barbecue and would let one man...
Oh, this is a great part. Here, I'm going to rewind it just to get the full effect here with the closed captions, okay?
How many men ever went to a barbecue and would let one man take off the table what's intended for 9/10 of the people to eat? The only way you'll ever be...
Just to recap, he said, how many men ever went to a barbecue and took off the table what was intended for 9/10 of the people to eat? How many men ever went to a barbecue and one man took 90% of the food on the table? Wouldn't that be wrong?
Be able to feed the balance of the people is to make that man come back and bring back some of that grub he ain't got no business with.
I absolutely love the Louisiana accent here. Man, come back and bring back that some of the grub they ain't got no business with.
Now we've got a barbecue. We have been praying to the Almighty to send us to a feast. We have knelt on our knees morning and night time. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done.
Thank you, Commie
On
Buddhist.
earth as it is in heaven.
Mods, give
We
Commie
have
Buddhist
asked
a
the
shout out.
Almighty
They have
to
flattered me.
fulfill that prayer
Go
of
follow
the
Commie Buddhist, everyone.
that he would smile on the field, give us rain in due season, cause our fields to yield the abundance necessary for life. That prayer has been answered. There has been yielded too much to eat, too much to wear, everything to live in. The Lord has answered the prayer. He has called the barbecue. Come to my feast. He said to 125 million American people. But Morgan and Rockefeller and Miller and Baruch.
I'm gonna teach mods to do a shout out. So you do exclamation point SO at here. I'm gonna do it. Commie Buddhist, and then it does that. Oh wait, did it not work? What the hell? Did it work? Okay, you did. Yeah, I'm late. Thank you. It's a delay or something. A cool down. Thank you. Ancom Soccer Mom beat me to it. Thank you, Ancom Soccer Mom. I appreciate you. Clouded Mind Todd Ancom early. Thank you, Clouded. King Mod, Clouded. Teaching the mods, bringing them up to speed. I appreciate you. Sorry about that.
I walked up and took 85% of the victuals off the table. Now, how are you going to feed the balance of the people? What's Morgan and Baruch and Rockefeller and Mellon going to do with all that grub?
Morgan and Baruch and Rockefeller and Mellon gonna do with all that grub.
They can't eat it. They can't wear the clothes. They can't live in the house. Give them a yacht. Give them a palace. Send them to Reno and give them a new wife when they want it. That's what they want. But when they've got everything on the God's living earth that they can eat and they can wear and they can live in, and all that their children can live in and wear and eat and all their children's children can use, then we got to call Mr. Morgan and Mr. Mellon and Mr. Rockefeller back and say, come back here. Well,
This is absolutely amazing. All Huey Long is saying is like, listen, Baruch, Rockefeller, Morgan, give them their yachts, give them their mistresses, give them their palaces, whatever they want, like all of those grand things that they already have. But after you have all of that, and after all of your children have all of that, you have enough for everyone you could conceive of. Come back on here and give us the rest. That's all he's saying. We'll see you, Abby. Thanks for coming by. Have a good one.
Stuff back on this table here that you took away from here that you don't need. Leave something else for the American people to do. Now, my friends, I have in a rather belabored effort told you about everything I stand, about everything I advocating from. I can't anticipate
Thanks
all
for the
this
link,
question.
Red Stick Redhead. I'll check it out.
I won't undertake this, though. I would have loved in my early days to have had the opportunity. They done quit depending on the newspapers. They don't know where they're coming or going. They don't know what to say. One day they say one thing, another day they say. But you have the nucleus, the composite group of people here, have the touch of the majority of the people of the United States. I'd like to have you, not supporting me. Maybe I can get along without it somehow or another. I'd like to have you study carefully, attentively, whether or not the American country is going to survive without recalling into being what the Lord said had to be done. Whether or not an inequality, starvation among plenty, a nakedness in the land of too much, a homelessness amid palaces, a luxury on the one hand, a pestilence on the other.
Oh, before we finish up here, Franglish brings up a good point. It's like a Trump rally, but if Trump were a left populist. You're not wrong. Huey P. Long was able to create a populist movement without racial demagoguery, without jingoism, without all the things that populism is now associated with reactionaryism, right? Populism was literally created as a leftist movement. It was created in Kansas in the 1890s. And Huey P. Long continued that tradition in the early 20th century in Louisiana. It is something we can and should learn from. Populism does not have to be reactionary. It does not have to be right-wing. You do not have to be a racial demagogue. You do not have to be a jingoist.
Whether or not we ought not to forget these big people and let the people of America understand that whether you've got an NRA or a JR or a PWA or a GIN or a JUTR, what? That nothing can survive, that nothing can advance against this abundance.
Trump is a false populist, you're right. But he appeals to populist sentiments.
Except that we say to America, 125 million, none shall be too big, none shall be too poor, none shall work too much, none shall be idle. No luxurious mansions empty, none walking the streets, none impoverished, none in pestilence, none in want, but in the land blessed by the smile of the Creator, with everything to be
I am a phoenix rising from the ashes.
That America will become a land sharing the fruits of the land, not for the favored few, not to satisfy greed, but that all may live in a land in which the Lord has provided an abundance sufficient for the luxury and convenience of the people in general, I think.
Ooh. Chills. That's our boy, Senator Huey Long. Cut all that together to make sure we had the full effect of Share the Wealth. I'm going to switch back real quick as we wrap up. Riviera says, but yeah, hearing this with a guy saying stuff I agree with, I can really understand why people are willing to follow Trump. At the end of the day, people want better for themselves and for their pain to be heard, and that works even when it's a grift. You're right. If you appeal to people's sentiments, if you meet them where they are, acknowledge their pain, and don't blame them for that pain, don't blame them for the conditions, the real material conditions that they have, that they live under, then they will respond accordingly. They will respond with their praise. The difference is, of course, is that Trump blames a certain group of people for that pain and misery, which is patently false, categorically, utterly false. It's insane. But people in desperate circumstances will believe that kind of shit, and they need to have an alternative. They have to. You're absolutely right, Riviera. And there is no good alternative for them now. You have Bernie, and you watch him get beat down. You have AOC and you watch her literally almost be assassinated by a crowd of foaming at the mouth chuds. And Senator Huey Long himself gunned down on the steps of the state capitol. Every time a left-wing movement has coalesced in this country, it has literally been gunned down. I blame Trump for that pain and misery, says Yehuza. Yeah, you can and should blame Trump. I mean, Trump is responsible for it just as much as any other person. He is a capitalist in his very bones. He is the third generation beneficiary of capitalism. He is a Rockefeller in his bones. He is the exact people that Huey P. Long is rallying against. Huey P. Long came from middle class, relatively modest background. Trump wants you to believe that he's the same. He's going to run in 2024, depending on how Biden is. He might win. I'm not sure about that. There's a lot that can happen between now and 2024. I'm of the opinion that he's going to crown someone else. I think he's going to run Ivanka. She'll be the first woman president of the United States. But I'm holding out hope that the Democrats will get their act together and just run the rock.
I am a phoenix rising from the ashes.
We'll have the dude's rock president. That's what will happen. With that, gang, what I'm going to do is our boy, Senator Huey P. Long, who we love and appreciate, who is no longer with us, our fallen comrade, he put on his channel here a rare, slowed down version of Every Man a King. So before we raid out, and I'm going to send you to our boy, Dan Simpson, I want to cap this off with a tribute to our friend, Senator Huey Long. He was a beloved member of our community, and he's going to be missed. So with that, remember our king. R.I.P. Every man's a king, but especially you, brother. There we go.
That's right. I weep for slumber, America, land of brave and true, with castles and clothing and food for all belongs to you. Every man a king, for you can be a millionaire. That's fine. But there's something belonging to others. There's enough for all people to share. When it's sunny June and December too, or in the winter time or spring, there'll be peace without end, every neighbor a friend, with every man a king.
What do you think about that?
I think it's fine.
Put her out, huh?
Senator, I think it's fine.
Okay.